Lee, welcome to the Gymnastics Growth Show.
Thanks for having me.
Welcome to the studio.
Yeah, it's fantastic, mate. Good
Thank
job.
you. Welcome back, actually. You know what? We've done 2 already.
We have. Slightly different environment.
Slightly, yeah. I think both were on Zoom, weren't they?
Yeah.
Episodes 18 and 37, if anyone wants to go back and revisit those. But yeah, we probably recorded one a fair few years ago.
Yeah, long time now.
And then one just after the world title medal.
Yeah.
Was that Stuttgart Worlds?
Memories, 2019, yeah.
2019 Stuttgart, parallel bars world champion. And we recorded one shortly after that.
Yes, we did.
I was thinking about that. I think yesterday, actually, when I was thinking about preparing for the episode, that really is quite a poignant memory for me because I was very close, like physically in the arena, to yourself and Joe, or P-Bars, I guess, when that actually took place. I must have been, 20 or 30 meters max. And I was able to kind of witness the euphoria and the emotion of that. And that's always kind of stayed with me, really, just being able to have experience a slice of what that looked like and felt like for you.
Yeah, there was a lot of emotion in the 10 minutes leading up, during and after that routine. Panic, pleasure, pain.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a real surreal moment. One that I've never really quite felt before and since.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can imagine. One of the questions I was going to ask, and we're getting straight in here, but is what's a coaching memory that you would like to revisit if you could? Would that be one of those, do you think? Or coaching moment, I should say, that you would revisit if you could?
Yeah, I mean, the medal speaks for itself. Everybody wants to be part of a gold medal, world championship medal, but I think the preparation that went into that routine, not knowing where it would lead, is a real proud moment for me. In that, we prepared a routine that Joe came to the conclusion that wasn't good enough in the Europeans beforehand.
In terms of the composition of the routine?
Difficulty, potential score. And I'd been trying for a long time to get him to do a certain element, which was an F value. And his counter-argument was that it was only worth 1/10 to him. So if we put the F value in, it was only going to get him 1/10. But it quickly became apparent that 1/10 meant everything.
Right.
And this routine was written out 4 years in advance. And the moment he actually accepted that maybe the routine that we needed was the one that we'd planned, we got on it. We actually tried a more difficult routine in the competition preparation beforehand. We were in somewhere in Germany. We had a control competition with the Germans. And we tried a new element, the Fraser. And we tried quite a difficult routine. In the end, we didn't go for that routine, but we knew that we'd got a 15 plus score in the routine that we'd prepared. And he scored 15 3 times, and that was enough to be a world champion. So we'll take it.
Yes, absolutely. Amazing.
Yeah.
Nice little story, that.
Yeah. Memories. I mean, Joe and I talk about it all the time.
Yeah.
And we've got a nice banner on the wall in the gym that reminds me every day when I walk in that, he made history books. It wasn't just becoming a world champion. It was the first black male world champion.
Wow.
The youngest in the competition.
In the whole of the world?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it was the youngest competitor at that. I'm pretty confident that that's true. So there are lots of really happy memories that go along with that medal.
Yep. And then 2 games since, of course.
Yeah.
Which is, amazing as well. It's interesting that you mentioned there about obviously involving Joe in the discussion of composition, which is clearly going to be important to the athlete, isn't it, as they mature. The other thing I think which is interesting there is the balance between risk and reward, which is a bit of a no-brainer when you're working at the level that you are. You have to understand how stable is the routine. And one thing I imagine you'd agree with me on this, that less experienced coaches struggle with is probably that emotional regulation of going, actually, we could do this, but that doesn't mean we should.
Yeah.
Because less experienced coaches, and I've been on that path as well, just think you do the maximum difficulty that you can. If they're capable of doing it in the gym, you stick it in a routine. Whereas actually that's not the mindset of a high-performing or a coach at a high-performance level, is it?
Yeah, and we constantly battle with ourselves, as you full well know. My philosophy, I suppose, is that if we are going to compete a routine, then the skills have to have been done many times beforehand. Take the routine, the World Championship winning routine, we knew that every skill in that routine had been competed in some combination beforehand. And it was only when we had to learn that one element, that it was only one element we had to focus on.
Yeah.
All of the other elements had been done throughout the cycle. We'd competed something and then taken it back out and put something else in. So Joe had had that competition exposure without doing the full routine. And then when it came to it, we knew that the difficulty was in the bag. We just needed to slot it all together, and off we went.
Yeah.
But that's probably my philosophy. I'm not necessarily sure it's a philosophy for everybody. I mean, I've seen it, and I still see it now that coaches and gymnasts, they learn a skill, they do it 2 times, and then it's in a half routine.
Yeah.
Which is great. It's a different way of doing it. But what I've always said to my gymnasts and the coaches that I mentor is that it's going to go wrong at some point. And you need the numbers and you need the steps and the stages to fall back on to rebuild it when it does fall apart. And I think by learning something, let's take a release and catch on high bar. If you do it, you catch it, we celebrate, you do it again, and then it's in a routine. Where's the psychological practice? Where's that practice when it's not quite right? And I think there's a lot to be said. So like for example, Kovacs, my guys had to catch 100 Kovacs before I would move it on or compete it.
Wow.
And I was strict with that.
Yeah.
And we wrote it down, and I'd do things like if they caught 5 in a row, I'd give them a bonus 5.
Nice.
But I was really quite adamant about they had to catch that, and it's reaping the rewards. Joe's one of the most consistent release and catches on the high bar now.
Yeah.
And I wish I could instill that in other coaches, but it takes a really stubborn coach to stick to those sort of rules.
Well, it's delayed gratification is really. I mean, think about all aspects of our life. That's quite challenging, isn't it?
Yeah.
So when you're in the gym and you're presented with a very capable athlete that's showing you that they're ready to perform something, and then they are, I think it's difficult sometimes for coaches to rein it in and go, well, actually, again, just because they have done it doesn't mean they should do it in routine. I mean, setting a target like having to do 100, I mean, that works well for so many reasons. It gives something very tangible that the athlete can focus on. It should be a driver for them.
Yeah.
You can track how long that's going to take them to do. I'm assuming do you count the bad reps in that as well? Or do you just log the good ones?
Because it was all about consistency of catch and catching with different actions, it was purely based on the number of catches.
Okay, yeah.
That was it.
Yeah, I mean, that's like the athlete can see and feel themselves getting closer to the time, which you can say, okay, maybe we're ready to put this into like a section now or a routine or whatever that might look like, which is really cool.
Yeah, and it gives them a target as well.
Yeah.
It's not just about catching, because catching gymnastics can get quite boring because it's repetition all the time, but it gave them a challenge within a challenge. We knew that they had to catch a certain amount, but they had a challenge of 5 in a row or this or that. It just kept them on their toes and stuff.
Yeah.
It was really good for me, actually. Like, it was good for me because I was challenging them. And it became a competition when they were all on the Kovacs together. It was who could catch 5 in a session, and that ultimately meant 10. And that means there were 10 in front of someone that didn't do it, So it's
because you can't stop them from competing, even if they're not competing.
And I promoted that because I think competition was, especially with boys, I mean, I don't really have much experience with WAG gymnasts, but boys love to compete.
Yeah.
Regardless of whether it's running around the floor, they want to run around faster than the kids behind them and stuff like that. So yeah, I've sort of tried to use that in my day-to-day coaching and stuff, and it seemed to work.
Yeah, I've seen a few environments where having healthy internal competition is one of the main drivers of the program.
Yeah.
The important word there is that it's healthy.
Yeah.
And it really is a massive plus when that can be kind of fostered.
Yeah,
and I think that does come from the coaching team and how they can kind of facilitate that from happening.
Yeah, and gymnastics is such a diverse sport. You don't have to just have your most talented kids competing against each other, because gymnasts develop and gymnasts have certain strengths and they can play that. You could have a gymnast that's not great on pommel horse, but he can compete with the best of them on high bar, or, he could be a really bouncy gymnast on floor. So they can all compete regardless of what level they're at. They can always find that competition in something.
Yeah. Just want to come back to what you'd mentioned about, I guess, the topic of stability in a routine. I've always gone on the basis of an athlete, when they step out onto the floor, they shouldn't compete more than 80% of their real capabilities or their competency. So, I mean, even a world champion, Olympic champion, I mean, let's take Simone, for example. What Simone is capable of on the competition floor is absolutely incredible. What she is also capable of doing in the gym, which she's never competed, is mind-blowing as well.
Yeah.
Because she, and again, probably a difficult concept for less experienced coaches to understand, but when you compete at 100% of their abilities, obviously, now you're becoming pretty unstable with what they're able to do when they're under pressure, when they're, you know this better than me, when you go to a training hall and you've not got pits around you and soft mats, and you've got to ask them to perform when they're tired, when they're pretty bored of what they're doing. That's different, isn't it?
Yes, I mean, we always strive to teach our gymnasts the most difficult, the most difficult elements, the most difficult combinations. But when it comes to that repetition, and especially at major championships, when they might have to do it 5 times, over the course of a week, that really puts the pressure on the mind and the body. And I think by expecting your gymnasts to compete at their maximum, it's I don't want to use the word dangerous, but it has potential to be, difficult for the gymnasts. A short landing or a fatigued takeoff. That's when things go wrong. So I think by always working to your maximum in the gym, I don't mind that. But when it comes to routines and stability, especially in team comps, you've got to know that your gymnasts can put their hand up and deliver that routine 90% of the time.
Yeah. For safety, stability, but it's the risk reward, isn't it?
Of course.
What's hard at the level that you're working at, take Joe winning a world title, you can't play it too safe, of course, because then you're opening the door for someone else to come in. But for the majority of listeners who are not taking an athlete yet to a world championships or Europeans or whatever that might look like, it's probably a really important lesson for them just to, yes, the athlete can do this skill. When they're in their home gym, it's soft mats around, they feel good, they're on familiar equipment, but actually you're now going to take them to an unfamiliar surface and they might be tired. They're certainly going to be stressed because of the competition, the judges and things, and that's where things could potentially go wrong, I guess.
Yeah, equipment, bounces, springboards, floors, everything has a part to play in the success of skills, and I think your gymnasts have got to be able to do it, wake them up, get them out of bed, and they should be able to do straight away.
Dennis, who you know very well also, Dennis Edwards, for the listeners here, who's mentored myself and Lee, did he ever talk about the 3 Ds with you? Distractions, disruptions, and differences of competition?
Yeah.
I just love that. I just think it's so relevant, isn't it?
It really is.
So many different stimuluses and things that change when you do step into a competition environment. So.
Yeah, and there's only so many things that we can recreate in our home environments.
Effectively, anyway.
Yeah. I mean, we like to think that we can distract them. I mean, I tried lots of different things, and I've done things like I'll get them to warm up on one pommel horse, and then when they're ready for routine, I'll tell them they have to go on another one, or I'll loosen the chain a little bit so it's a little bit less, stable. I've tried it all just to recreate an environment that they're not familiar with. I mean, you're never going to recreate that 15,000 people screaming at you when you're in a competition environment. It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
But Joe always said to me that we need to be comfortable in being uncomfortable. And taking that's what I try. I try and create an environment that whilst it's not the same as a competition environment, it makes them a little bit uncomfortable in. See how they can cope with their skills, their combinations, their halves, and their routines.
What about you as a coach? When you walk into an arena, whether it's an Olympic arena or whether it's Stuttgart 2019, it's harder for you. Well, yeah, I guess so. I mean, the pressure's not quite the same as what it would be on Joe, but you're not practicing walking into an arena with all those people as a coach, and you're performing in that role as well.
Yeah.
You could screw that up as well as Joe could in terms of you're both contributing to the outcome there.
Yeah.
How do you feel when you first walk into an arena like that and you've got the pressure of the potential of a medal, a historic medal, for example?
I think walking into an arena, it's developed across the years. When I first did it, there was no expectation of medals or performances. My expectation was just to survive.
Yeah.
And don't look stupid. I remember going to a domestic comp when I first started coaching, and I put the springboard on the right measurement for a gymnast. And when he went to put his hand up, he's shouting at me, and I didn't realise, but I put the springboard the wrong way around. Because I was nervous.
Yeah.
I've done the parallel bars, and I've put them on the wide width instead of the narrow width. So I've made my fair share of mistakes.
You and me both. Yeah.
But I think when it really came to it, the World Championships, the European Championships, the Olympics, because the team environment has been so normal, you've been with the team for so long,
you're comfortable as well.
What every coach, what every gymnast, every coach that's on there with you, you have a role, and you fit into this, one coach does this, one coach does that. So for me, I've never really thought about medals. It's just about do the routine.
Mm-hmm.
It's the only thing you can control, So my job was to make sure the gymnast felt supported. So I'd often stand at the side of the equipment and I'd scream. I didn't care that I sounded a bit random or a bit strange. I was screaming at the kids. I say kids, they've always been kids to me, but they're now adults. Because that's what I feel they need. They need that support. They need to know that they're not on their own. At the European Championships in 2024, I went out on the floor with them in the team final, and I banged each one on the chest, and I said, we'll do this together.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be there every step of the way. And one of the gymnasts, he was struggling on his pommel routine, and I was screaming at him. And he finished his dismount. He came across, and the first thing he said was, "Thanks for that."
And you talk about screaming of encouragement here,
of course, yeah. Gymnastics,
and that's what they need sometimes in those environments.
They just want to know whatever's going on in the arena, they can always hear the person closest to them. And the guy on pommel jumped off and he said, I wouldn't have got through that without you. So I think as much as it's an individual sport, they're on the podium on their own. They are always willing to have that support and that encouragement from someone at the side.
Yeah.
And I'll always try, and I'll try and encourage them as well as I can. Vault's a little bit more difficult because they start at one end and they end the other, but high bar, I'm shouting. Joe made a mistake actually when he became European all-round champion in 2022, and I just shouted at him and said, "It's okay, carry on, you're fine," because you could see him, he was panicking. And when he finished, he says, "Thanks." He said, "I didn't know what to do." He says, "And I heard you say I'd be all right," and he carried on. So it's we have a really important role to play just because we're not doing the gymnastics.
Yeah. And isn't that interesting that someone with Joe's experience still, when you put them on the stage and they make a mistake, they can still go, "I don't know what to do right now." And it's being in those environments and actually going through all those different scenarios, because ultimately maybe that mistake he'd never made in that scenario itself. Coaches are important, of course.
It is. I mean, the only reason I knew he'd be okay is that you're forever calculating scores. What do they need? What happens if they make this mistake and they lose that deduction? So I knew. I'd always calculated that if that certain mistake happened, he'd lose this amount of tenths, but would still be all right. And that's why I shouted at him. Just, "You're okay. Just calm down and get to the end. You'll be fine."
Benefit of being a competent judge as well as a coach, you're able to do that quickly in your head as well.
Yeah, of course. And I think it's really important that coaches and judges are, intertwined, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely.
Short interruption. If you're a head coach, club owner, manager, or leader, check out our high performance health check for a free insight into how well your club's operating within our 6-category framework. Head to nickroddick.com/health check to take our 10-minute assessment. We'll send you the results straight to your inbox. Back to the episode.
Last time we saw each other, it wasn't actually too long ago, was it? We were in Australia. We were far away.
We were there in body, but not necessarily soul. Jet lag was a bit of a killer, wasn't it?
Jet lag was a killer. But how was the rest of your trip after we sort of finished the conference? And you carried on to training, didn't you, with Joe? Is that right?
Yeah. So you and I did Friday, Saturday, Sunday, didn't we? And then Joe and I went into Sydney on the Monday and had a walk around, which was crazy because we were sitting there at the Opera Bar, recommended by yourself. And some guy came up and recognised him and asked for a picture.
That's cool.
Yeah, so we were halfway around the world, and Joe Fraser, the gymnast, is still being recognised, which was quite cool. Yeah, and we walked around the Opera House and stuff, and then I did some coaching with Hero from Japan for across the week, like their high performance squad, which was nice. It was nice to get my hands dirty and do some gymnastics coaching, which was always good. And we went up to the Blue Mountains and stuff. So Joe and I had a bit of a holiday in between coaching and training, which was really good.
That's cool.
Yeah, loved it.
Yeah, everything about that trip was fantastic, apart from the travel. As you'd expect, it's never fun, is it? 21 to 24 hours traveling on the
Just
plane.
so far away.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
But what an amazing place.
Yeah, loved it.
Let's bring this to your experience again as a coach. If you had a group of coaches sat in front of you, you have 30 minutes to try and impact the future of their coaching. It's the only 30 minutes that you're ever going to spend with them.
Yep.
What would you choose to talk about in that time?
Embrace failure. And whilst it's very difficult to accept, we're here to coach seniors. I think we all want success, because as a coach, our success is based upon the success of our gymnasts. And sometimes we fall victim of searching for that success. And it's such a short journey to junior success. It doesn't necessarily mean the senior success will happen. There's not that many juniors that are massively successful that continue on to be seniors. And whether it was ego or whether it was confidence in my own ability, I never strived to have successful juniors. It happened, and I was really lucky. But the plan, and every day that I walked in the gym, the plan was based around having a team of senior gymnasts and successful senior gymnasts. And that's what I would like to communicate to every coach that I sat in a room with. Yeah, that gymnastics is a long sport, and do whatever you do in the gym is for the benefit of them being seniors, not juniors.
Why do you think, and I agree, by the way, that I did the stats in previous national coaching roles, that there was a 5% chance, this was at the time based on the current rules, but a 5% chance that the 9-year-olds that medalled nationally would end up competing for the nation as a senior international gymnast. So basically the best 9-year-olds in the country, there's only a 5% chance of them, in inverted commas, making it. And I thought that was quite an interesting stat. But again, it didn't surprise me. I think intuitively, we probably know that, because we recognize that there are so many kids that you said, succeed very quickly that was pre-junior. I mean, 9-year-old's just a developmental athlete or child. But why do you think that is, from your experience? So let me ask this in a maybe a easier way for you to respond to. What's the difference between producing an athlete that goes on, surpasses junior success and reaches senior level, versus someone that stops at junior level?
It's probably two things. I always communicated with my guys why I was doing things. We're doing this exercise because I want you to do this when you're an adult, when you're a senior. We're doing this preventative exercise because I want you to maintain that healthy body throughout your teenage years. But also, I think those who strive for early success expect success all the time. And I don't think it's going to happen, because gymnastics and gymnasts develop and they peak at different times. And I've seen it so many times that gymnasts are successful and then they lose a little bit of strength, flexibility, or they lose gymnastics while they're growing, and they can't cope with that. And it's very difficult to explain to a gymnast that's been winning everything that it happens, and you have to be patient. They find other stimulus in other sports, or they find other things to find that success, And I think gymnastics has to be a gradual thing. And if we get success, that's great. I'm not saying that we purposely don't go out to win medals.
Of course.
But I think that the bigger picture is it's a journey. We're not looking to win medals in the beginning. But again, it's easier to say than do.
Yeah, and I think when you've got a talented, inverted commas again, athlete that's pretty competent, they pick up technical skills early, they might actually be able to do tricks without technique at a young age, right?
Yeah.
And again, I think we've all probably made this mistake at some point. You've got, competent athlete, they accomplish or they acquire skills early. They've got a pretty significant advantage at a young age if they've got high level difficulty. Even if the technique's not very good, they're probably going to score higher. And then at some point, that just runs out.
People catch up with them as well.
Yeah, people catch up, or poor technique. There's a ceiling to poor technique very early. There's obviously physical challenges. You're exposing young kids to high difficulty. There's not many bodies that can cope with that or sustain that through developmental into junior and then to senior as well. So I think it's probably those areas which I've seen and noticed. So let's get a 9-year-old to medal. We'll chuck all the skills in that we can, or 11, 12 years old. Okay, but can they physically do that now for the next 5-6 years? And can they build on the skills that you've kind of taught them, kind of just let them crack on and pick up themselves?
I mean, when my guys were juniors, I did 4-hour training every night. So that was my training block, 4-hour sessions. And people were amazed that I used to condition and I did physical prep for an hour and 15 minutes every day.
Yeah.
Because that was the main priority, flexibility and physical preparation, because I knew with that, gymnastics would happen. And it proved it in time. The guys were not necessarily the best, but as they got older, they were far more capable of picking things up very quickly because their bodies were ready. It wasn't like I was teaching their bodies were ready. I just had to teach them gymnastics.
Yeah.
And I'd maintain that now. If I was to start again, I'd do the same. I think physical preparation, flexibility is so important in the longevity of the gymnasts. It's probably my number one fundamental.
It's hard, I think, for coaches that haven't been through this process before. So anyone just starting out on the coaching journey to understand. And analogy I use, so I don't know if you take any supplements. I take a whole range of supplements, to try and help my body. So let's take magnesium, for example. I've got no clue whether it's working or not.
Yeah.
I've taken it for 6 weeks. I don't feel any different. All I know is I'm paying a fortune a month on 12 supplements, I think. And I've got no idea within reason that if any of them are actually kind of making a difference to how I feel.
Yeah.
I think sometimes that is the case with our athletes. The progress can be really, really slow. Yeah. So the physical preparation takes a while. As a coach, you don't noticeably see, because of that, I guess the slow process of building skills, building strength, building flexibility, you might not notice a difference.
Yeah.
And you get to the point and go, well, is this actually useful? I mean, at some point I've got to go, I'm spending this money every month. I've got no idea. You know what? I'm just going to cancel my magnesium subscription as an example.
Yeah.
And maybe that's the same for coaches as well, that, we do a lot of stuff because we hear that it's the right thing to do. Whether or not in the short term we see it is another thing, and you therefore got to be the patient one that goes, I'm just going to ride this out because so many people are telling me that physical prep is important. So I'll stick with this journey and just trust the experienced coaches kind of know what they're talking about.
Yeah, and that's it, isn't it? You can't hide away from experience, and people who with that experience, if they're giving you some information, there's merit in listening to what they've got to say. When I first started my coaching journey, Paul Hall, as former head national coach, said to me that the key to pommel horse is doing it every day and doing this program. And I blindly took it.
Yep.
And then as my guys got older, they were arguably the best team in the country, Europe, if not the world, on pommel horse. And then when you look back now, I was doing it. I'm no longer in charge of the development squad in Great Britain, but I was adamant that I was going to instill that in their program as well, and whether they took it away or not, that was up to the coaches, but I was going to show that consistency was key. But when you look back on the best or the most successful pommel horse workers in our country, Max, Lewis, Dan, Joe, Joshua, Nathan, all of these people have been exposed to some sort of pommel program.
Yeah.
So the results speak for themselves.
It's a recipe that delivers what it's supposed to deliver.
Of course. And I just think it's everything will happen over time. A mentor of mine, Alex Shirev, Ukraine coach, very good coach, and I learned a lot from him, said to me, even if it's wrong, as long as it's consistent, they'll improve. And whilst every idea that we have may not work, you'll get something out of it if you do it day in, day out.
Yeah.
And I think there's no harm in trying. Gymnastics is such a long process. Try it. If it doesn't work, what have you lost? But if it does work, you've gained so much.
Yeah.
So give it 6 months, give it 12 months. If it doesn't work, then they will have got something from it. But if you decide that actually that's not the way that you want to go in the end, you've not lost that much time, really.
I love that. It kind of links to two things that we've talked about recently on the podcast with other guests. So one was with Dennis again. Dennis just talked about that. He called it run the experiment. Just run the experiment, and that's what coaching is. You run the experiment, you give it a go. Of course, you then assess and see whether it's worth doing again. Kind of like plan, do, review.
Yeah.
And the other one was, I think I'd mentioned something similar to what Alex had mentioned there with one of our group podcasts. I'm pretty sure Reese was on that one, Reese Beckford. And the discussion was very much about the importance of structure. Bad structure is better than no structure at all.
Yeah.
Because at least with bad structure, you can go, well, this plan, okay, it's not great, but it's a starting point that we can then pivot and go, let's try this instead.
Yeah.
You can get feedback from it.
Yeah.
You've got no plan at all. It's really difficult to know what's working, what isn't working, or how you can tweak things moving forward. So
yeah, gymnastics I think is all about structure.
Yeah.
Session structure, routine structure, just behavioural structures, expectations are part of structures for me. So yeah, without that, you're blindly trying to do something and not really having a direction, are you? So.
Maybe an important point for the listeners is to understand that simplicity could be really useful with that structure as well. So it doesn't need to be a complex program on pommels, for example, or P-bars, whatever that might be. And correct me if I'm wrong here. If it does need to be complex, then that's fair. But a lot of the time, ignoring the noise, I call it the fluffy stuff. Like just stick to a consistent plan of simple stuff executed very well.
Yeah.
And if you can do that repeatedly and daily, then you will see progress. You don't need to do every idea that you see on social media.
I stick to two things, regardless of whether I'm coaching the most elite seniors or the most basic of juniors. Efficient learning, efficient teaching. As coaches, we often get caught up in the details, and the gymnasts, especially the young babies, are looking at you and they're thinking, what? He's just given me 10, 11, 12 coaching points here. And I think the simplicity is you can get your point across in a language that they understand. You don't have to give them lots. And coaches are the same. Just give them a really important point, that can carry them through. Don't give them too much information. You can build upon that base as they develop as coaches and as they develop as gymnasts. But trying to give them too much information at the beginnings, it's not great. Keep it simple, keep it efficient teaching, teach the basics, and then add, like Lego, add.
Build your foundations first, and then
You got it. And
like a house, build your foundations of the house, build the main structure of the house, add the hot tub later.
Yeah.
Those extras and things. So
yeah, I think, some people want it all and they walk away with nothing.
Yeah.
Again, it just goes back to slowly building, to when they're seniors rather than trying to give everything to the juniors.
Delayed gratification.
You got it.
So it's so important. You mentioned earlier, you said, if I could do this again, or I would do that again if I could, like if I could go back.
Yeah.
And it made me think, what would you not do again if you went back? And I'm assuming when you say go back, you mean like the start of a journey with a young group of developmental boys, for example. So is there anything that you look back on and go, it was good then, but actually it's not now, or it was bad then and I never even just realised?
Technique's forever evolving. So I wouldn't necessarily, whilst my basic understanding of technique would probably remain the same, I wouldn't be scared to experiment with new techniques. We always talk about the way that the Japanese twist on floor, and I would experiment with that.
Yeah.
And I think I was so set in my ways about gymnasts having the perfect approach to the springboard and the perfect handstand. Once I achieved that, I didn't necessarily carry it on, and bad habits came in. But by the time even now when Joe's on vault, I'm trying to correct habits that have crept in since he was a baby. But he didn't have it when I taught it.
Yeah.
And I think because you're expected to teach so much of gymnastics, consciously or unconsciously, you stop doing things.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I would always have time for a basics day, maybe.
Okay.
The focus on the springboard, the perfect handstands, the drive back in the flick, the head positions in skills. Something that you just take for granted. Oh, I've taught that. I don't need to look at that anymore because they can do it. And then 10 years later, you look back and you think, oh my word, what is going on here?
How's that crept in?
Yeah. So I think there's a lot to be said for, again, taking your time and just giving basic techniques and basic actions the respect that they need throughout the whole of the gymnastics career, rather than just teach it, it's done, move on now.
You familiar with my pyramid of preparation?
I've seen it, but I don't know it off by heart.
Yeah, so the top segment of that. So in the model, there's essentially 5 stages of skill acquisition that I share. So if we start from the base, physical prep, unsurprisingly, technical preparation, practicing the skill, consolidating it, and then adaptation. So what we're referring to in the change part is that once we've taught a skill, it never stays the same. It does continue to evolve, but it could happen in a positive adaptation, or it might be a poor one.
Yeah.
A poor one, we tend to say it's a bad habit that's crept in.
Yeah.
And an example that I tend to use is like of a positive adaptation will be like a handspring vault.
Yeah.
So when we first teach young kids to do a handspring, you might tell them to whack the heels over as fast as they can. And actually, whilst that might be the technique that you use with a senior athlete trying to do a handspring pike 1.5, you might actually be more interested in the hip drive first, like a pike kick out action. So that will be an example of positive adaptation.
Yeah.
I guess another one is a round off, and perhaps this is slightly different from the MAG community because round offs look very different, or there's a wide threshold of acceptability. I think within the WAG program, most coaches are probably teaching a T position with the hands with the younger kids.
Yeah.
But if you then look at Olympic Games or major championships, you don't see anyone doing a T shape, of course.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And the adaptation occurs because those senior athletes have got enough upper body strength to not need to transfer the weight perfectly from one hand to the other and stuff. So that's kind of the pyramid of preparation in a nutshell. And I guess you referred to the fact that you taught it and then perhaps you don't revisit it. I always think like the ratio changes. When we first teach a skill, we've got like huge amount of preparation, hardly much of like attempting or practicing the element. And of course, over time, that shifts, doesn't it?
Yep.
We end up doing a lot of performing the skill and then maybe not much preparation. And perhaps it gets to a stage where you don't do any preparation at all. You just perform. And just coaching is about balance, as you've mentioned. It's about finding where that balance point is. So like, what's the level, the ratio between performance of the skill and preparation of the skill in order to maintain this over time? And I guess our job as coaches is to get the athlete to maintain a skill with the least amount of maintenance time.
Yeah. I haven't got the right answer. I don't know the exact answer, but
do you understand what I mean about? If you let's say that you wanted to learn a Kovac, you're spending months on preparations and you spend an awful lot of time on trampoline. But then when they've acquired that skill, you might go to trampoline every now and then and do a couple of Kovac drills, but you're not going to do anywhere near the volume pre-learning it.
No, and that's it. Yeah, you're right. You've just got to find that balance that reinforces your technique without taking away all that time from the high bar session.
Yeah, or other skills which now have moved into the acquisition stage that you're like, well, you've learned that, you now need to learn something else.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't got an excuse. The guys can train twice a day. You know what? I've got more than enough time to be able to do that. But I think I just forgot. You get carried away with learning new things and this and that, and you forget some of the things that you think, sometimes I see a drill that somebody does and I'm like, oh, I used to do that. It's an amazing drill.
Yeah.
I'll bring that back in. You just forget to do things.
Of course. And it's easily done, isn't it? I mean, I'm sharing that example to try and help the listeners understand what I think happens in all of our coaching there. And we forget because there's always so much stuff that we could do. We probably want to do, don't we? Like it's all fun stuff. And you see, like I certainly suffer from shiny object syndrome that I'm like, oh, I want to give that a go. Well, you say yes to one thing, you say no to something else. And maybe that thing that you're saying no to is actually what works.
Yeah. Yeah, but then if you try and do too much, you're not doing enough of anything.
Yeah.
You know.
And here's the headache of coaching.
Yeah. I mean, it comes back to sticking to something and not giving it a go.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I've spoken to a friend of mine who coached on the WAG side, and I said, you know, why are you doing that? Well, because everybody else is doing it. But is it useful to you? And I think sometimes we fall foul of trends and not necessarily what's right for us and our athlete, but because everyone else is trying it.
Yeah.
We want to jump on that bandwagon, you know, and it takes a brave person to step away from the norm to do what's right for their athletes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Again, that comes with experience.
Yeah. Yeah. Confidence comes from, conviction comes from confidence. Confidence in what you're doing. And you talk a lot about vision, don't you?
Yeah.
Like, why is that important? And what does that mean when you're talking about sticking to the vision? Like, what does that help you with that you would suffer with if you didn't have that mindset?
I have to have a pathway to follow for me, because I am slightly ADHD, autistic, whatever you want to call it, and I can flick from one thing to another. And I think by having a vision, I want, and when I say a vision, it's a vision that's done with my guys. You know, I will sit down with the coaches or the gymnasts and I'll say, right, what is it that you want to achieve? When do you want to achieve it? How are we going to achieve that? And the vision might be an Olympic Games. For example, everyone wants to go to an Olympic Games. It's not always achievable, but then we'll map out that journey, you know, and the milestones that come with that journey. And that's their short, medium, and long-term goals. And the vision is that the end product, you know, if we can hit all of these, then we're well on the way to achieving that goal and that vision. And the vision is something for me to plan towards as well. It just gives me direction.
Yeah.
I think, you know, otherwise, again, I'd just be coming in, and when I say vision could be 8 years, 2 cycles, 12 years away. But I have to have an end goal to work towards, just for my blinkered mindset.
Yeah, that makes sense. Luke came on the podcast. He was episode 84. Wasn't in the studio at that point. That was a great episode. He also talked about the importance of structure for him, coming, you know, as a former international athlete, and the process of going to the gym every day and following a program and actually taking that into your coaching. And I guess you mentioning there about having a vision and somewhere to aim towards is just another way of saying, I need structure.
Yeah.
But an inspiring, I mean, vision for me is, the way that I perceive vision is, it's like a magnet that draws me towards it because it's something that inspires me.
Yeah.
So whether that's a vision for a coaching result or for the business or whatever that might be, it's compelling. It drives me. It gets me out of bed every day. And then you get lost in that structure then of, okay, it's fun, you know.
Yeah, it is. I mean, the challenge for me was that when I was heavily involved in the senior system, I wanted to go to these majors, or I wanted to help the team that were going to the majors, because I desperately wanted them to get on the podiums on a Worlds, a Euros, or an Olympic stage. And I talk to people now and I say, it felt heavy on my heart because I was so desperate for those guys. So everything was about helping the gymnasts for me, you know. It's really hard for me to explain. I've never really got the right words, but it weighs heavy. Like, whenever I think about going to majors with the team, what can I do to help those guys achieve their dreams?
Yeah.
You know, and it really pulls heavy on my heart.
Yeah.
If I don't think that I've done enough to help them. Can't explain it more than that, but it's
beautiful. It's beautifully said.
Thank you.
And a nice note for us to wrap up this third episode. Thank you, mate. Thanks for coming in.
No problem. You know, I thoroughly enjoy it. I'd come back every day if I could.
Yeah, I love getting lost in these conversations and exploring, and I'm obviously always inspired by your work and your results, and There's so much that I can learn from you. I know there's a massive amount that the audience can learn from you as well, and I appreciate you coming in and being so open and sharing your expertise. And let's make sure we get a fourth one in the future as well.
Yeah, looking forward to it already. Thank you.
Thank you.
Brilliant.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Gymnastics Growth Show. Now, if you're an ambitious gymnastics coach with a hunger for self-improvement, check out my Gymnastics Growth Academy, where you'll find members from over 40 countries, all accessing my masterclasses, courses, templates, live community calls, exercise libraries, and so much more. It's a program that members have described as life-changing. So why don't you check it out for yourself? Head to gymnasticsgrowth.com to learn more. See you on the inside.